Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. My name is Beatriz Cantada. I'm the Director of Diversity and Engagement in the Institute Community and Equity Office, ICEO. I'm excited to have you all join us this afternoon. Before we begin, we'd like to begin by honoring the land in which MIT sits on. MIT acknowledges Indigenous peoples as the traditional stewards of the land and the enduring relationship that exists between them and their traditional territories. The land in which we sit is a traditional unceded territory of the Wampanoag Nation. We acknowledge the painful history of genocide and forced occupation of their territory, and we honor and respect the many diverse Indigenous people connected to this land on which we gather from time immemorial. We start with a land acknowledgement because Indigenous peoples have always practiced the honoring of guests as well as their hosts when visiting other nations and communities. A friendly reminder, please stay muted during the presentation. There will be an opportunity to engage with each other, and at that time, feel free to unmute. Before we begin also, I'd like to extend recognition and acknowledgements to several folks in this space. So thank you, Aisha, for being our Zoom producer, and also Rachel, who is helping us behind the scenes. I also want to acknowledge some senior leaders in our space this afternoon. So my boss, John Dozier, is in the room. Hi, John, thank you. So for those that are not familiar with John, he is the Institute Community and Equity Officer. I also want to recognize our colleagues from Lincoln Lab who are joining us this afternoon. I see some communications folks, graduate students, postdocs. So thank you for joining us this afternoon. Really a great mix of folks in this space. So before we begin also, our next event, which is not the ICU Community Dialogues, but worth mentioning, is our MLK Scholars Program. So next Thursday, January 27th, we do have Dr. Chris Dorsey presenting also via Zoom. So definitely please join us if you are available. And if you need more information, feel free to reach out via chat or contact Rachel Ornitz, also in this space. So the great news is for this afternoon, we will be providing an Uber Eats voucher for all the virtual attendees. Woohoo! So Aisha will take care of pasting that in the chat session. So you have about 24 hours to use it. So don't fret about using it right now. Again, you have 24 hours to use the Uber Eats voucher. A couple of reminders, closed captioning has been turned on and we are recording this session. Nina Harris serves as the Restorative Resolution Coordinator in the Institute Discrimination and Harassment Response Office here at MIT. She facilitates adaptable resolution processes such as facilitated dialogue, mediation, and restorative conferencing as alternative resolution pathways to investigation, adjudication for addressing concerns of bias, discrimination, harassment, and misconduct based on protected classes. Bringing the lens of restorative practice, she works to expand opportunities for holistic solutions to individuals and community harm beyond just disciplinary action. As equity and violence prevention advocate, educator, and restorative justice practitioner with over 20 years of experience in higher education, administration, and student engagement, Nina has provided crisis and resource counseling for hundreds of survivors of gender-based interpersonal sexual violence and identity-based harm and harassment. Her practice anchors around frameworks of anti-racism, anti-oppression, restorative transformative justice, strength and resiliency building, and trauma-informed praxis. Nina formerly held the roles of advocate, crisis counselor, program manager, educator, and Title IX conduct case manager for complainants and respondents at Harvard University, Swarthmore College, and the University of Pennsylvania. I pass the virtual mic now to Nina. Take it away, Nina.
Woo, that was a mouthful more than was needed, but thank you, Beatrice, for introducing me and giving me space to be in community with you all today. I say in community, and I also recognize we are still in this kind of weird virtual connecting space. And I was so excited when we first discussed this topic that we could physically be in community together. But that day will soon come. And this is also the reality that we're navigating. And what does it mean to build community and connection and always, just as a function of who we want to be, but, particularly in this difficult time, how do we center those things? So I know that we have a little bit of time together today, and I will, start with saying I'm very ambitious what I like to try to accomplish and get in. And restorative justice and practice is such a big topic that touches on so many areas. So what I do hope to do with us today is to lead us through a little bit of some circle practice. So opportunity for us to connect with one another around the issues of community and some of our reflections on where we see restorative practice as a way to kind of both learn and connect together with each other. So I do have some slides in the slide deck, and I'm not going to start immediately with the slides. I will get to them, I think, when is most necessary. It's always better to see faces, but I think, I recognize we all have different modalities of connecting with information. So I want to make sure we have access to that. So first I'll just say, I know Beatrice gave that really long bio about a lot of the work that I'm doing, but we're more than our work. And a way I like to frame myself and how I come into community is as a healer and as a warrior. And I frame those two because I do what I work centered from the values of love and liberation. And I recognize that we are challenged in our current climate environment of how to really center those things in ways that really support community. I've always worked in higher ed and kind of student facing roles and community roles. So I've so intimately been touched by the complexities of how do we do this well? Even when we're supporting our students and our community at our best, there still is often an incompleteness to that process, a lack of healing, a lack of reconnection. And I've watched over time our communities become more and more divisive. So, restorative justice was introduced to me as a practice that could really help support what I was struggling with. And how do we frame community in more just and equitable ways? And so I really appreciate us being able to start with the land acknowledgement, because a lot of what we've come to understand about contemporary restorative practices is really born from Native American, Indigenous cultures and work. And so I will own and claim that as a Black woman, as a woman of color, to be able to reclaim traditions that we know have been vital to our well-being and our humanity, that have upheld cultures who have been exploited and oppressed and marginalized, that there was something so healing about recognizing that there was an opportunity to reach back and reclaim these practices. And a lot of what these practices bring forward is a reevaluation of our values and how we frame what is important. How do we center our humanity? How do we lift up our voices? How do we create space to have a kind of democratic participation? If we say that all voices matter, do our systems and ways of being reflect that? And if we take the time to pause and challenge ourselves, we often see that they don't necessarily align with that. And so restorative practice really just came from this simple space of how do we recreate the conditions that allow community to come together, to acknowledge those voices, to understand the needs, and to commit to one another. What are the actions that we need to take to be responsible for changing and transforming that community? And so I know a lot of what we see is from the kind of harm framework. A lot of it was embedded in the response to criminal justice, and we've seen that as an alternative. But what I really want to kind of bring to center is not restorative practice as an alternative, but restorative practice, and not restorative practice just as a way that we respond to harm, but restorative practice and circle practice is a way we bring ourselves back to the center of our humanity and examine our values to move forward. So we're going to do that a little couple of ways. Like I said, I want to try to get us into a little circle. So we'll have opportunities to kind of share and break down. And I just want to see if I can see faces. Have anybody been in circle before, participated in a restorative circle? Hands, little, emojis if you can reach it. Okay, all right. So we got a few folks and a few familiarity. And so a lot about what we want to do is build the container about how we connect. And so the first thing I want to ask you to do is just a quick quick little exercise is, if you can, and if you can change the name on your Zoom. And if you go to the participants list, there's a little link next to your name where you can rename yourself. There are a couple of ways that you can do that. And what I want you is, if you can, next to your name, I would like you to add a value that you bring to community. When you come to community space to connect, to dialogue, what is the value that you bring? And so just to kind of model and show that for you, I am Nina, and next to my name, I put courage. And again, I know this might be a little hard because we all bring a lot of things. We're more than just one thing, but just finding the one we want to kind of center. And so courage for me is an important part about being in space and having the ability to lift up my voice in spaces and times when I know it's not welcome, in places where I know my opinion isn't agreed with, and recognizing that it's still valuable. And so, you know, bringing the courage to be in that space authentically with my truth is a really important part of a value that I want to center in coming into community. So I want to give you all a second to invite yourselves to do that change. Think about the things that are important to you and bringing in that to community. Awesome. Okay. So now, and if those of you, and I know I'm still new to MIT, even though I just hit my 1-year anniversary mark. Yay. I don't know what 1 year means in COVID terms, but here we are. I want to have a quick couple of activities. And I love when we do workshops, I try to say conversations, how much of a conversation we can have with 60 people. We'll try our best to do that. Aisha, if you can help, we're going to break down into some groups, and we're going to have a chance to do a quick little intro. And what we call this is 30 seconds. And so we're going to break you down into groups of 10, and I'm going to give you 30 seconds to introduce yourselves to each other. 30 seconds to make connects, and then we'll come back. Okay. So we got some folks, floating back now. This is the part, if I can have some brave folks to give me some reflections. How was that introduction? Who'd you meet? Did you feel like you had to connect with folks? How was that like our everyday, right?
I think it was great, but just way too quick.
Too quick.
Some folks didn't get to introduce themselves.
Okay, more.
I think we thought we had 30 seconds each.
30 seconds each, because that would make sense, right? That's what we thought. So did folks just kind of start in, and then other folks didn't get to introduce themselves? Is that what happened? When you saw the time clicking, what happened? Did folks adjust? Oh, come off mic. We can get some popcorn, some folks in.
Yeah, it felt like it was very transactional in nature, as opposed to transformative, where we could really talk about our values.
Awesome. So just really transactional, really quick, not actually enough time to really make a real connection. A couple of other reflections. And even again, like, how does this relate to our kind of everyday, our day-to-day work life space?
There was somebody in my group with whom I'm actually working on a project, and we've never met till now. So that was awesome and way too fast.
So even that, and thank you, my Nina friend. Hi.
Hi.
I've made connections with the Nina, go figure. But yes, right, even that, even I find myself this place. I'm working with people on projects. I've been here for a year, and I've actually never really met them outside of that moment in space, right? So any other, kind of quick reflection about how this relates to how we connect every day, like how this is what this looks like, right?
I think in our group, when we saw the 13 seconds pop up, we just all kind of went laughed and then went silent, which I think is like indicative of life. When you don't have time to make an actual connection, you just don't make a connection.
Thank you so much. I lost you. Now I lost your name. Damn it. Oh, Carolyn. can't see this Zoom thing, you're flipping around. But perfect example, right? We recognize that like making connections, building relationships is essential, not to just us working well and being productive, but to our well-being, you know, to our whole selves, to our success. But we also recognize we don't have the time, that our structures aren't really created for us to have that time. And that, you know, sometimes it gets to a point where we don't even invest in that value, right? Because it's not there. So we shift that energy even away from making that connection. So I want to shift, and we're going to go back in circle, and we're going to give you a little different prompt. And you'll have an opportunity to take a little bit more time to connect and introduce yourselves. So, and I'm going to give you a different prompt to introduce yourselves a little bit. So one, you have your value, just quickly, you know, name your value and why it's important to you, but also just who you are and how do you want to be seen in community, right? We have our roles, we have our identities, but at the core is how do we want to be seen? What's important of how we want to be seen? And thank you. And so I will give a quick caveat before we move into space. That you have an opportunity. I want to introduce an element to our conversation, and we'll talk more about circle design and circle elements. But one of the things that come with circles is the talking piece. And I really, really appreciate the talking piece. And names, hands, if folks are familiar, you might not be familiar with circle, but you may have heard of a talking piece before as a part of a dialogue process. Yes. And it does come from Native American practice. And what I really appreciate about the talking piece is actually, I like to think of it as a listening piece. And so often, again, you know, we're getting community, we get in dialogue, and how often do a few of us show up to watch three or four people speak, right? And we're kind of observers to a community conversation. So the talking piece recognizes our voice. It recognizes the importance of our voice and the ability to take up space in that community conversation. But more importantly, it frees us up to listen. And so what is our opportunity to understand who we're in space with? When time is such an essential element, we're often jockeying for what we're going to say next and how we're going to frame it. And we miss an opportunity to actually take that true pause and recognize and hear who we're in community with. How can we understand each other and our needs? How we can work together to collaborate if we aren't making and taking the time to build relationships to make that kind of connection, right? So this is an opportunity for us to connect. And what I will also say about the talking piece is that you have an opportunity to pass. And so equally, we can just listen and be present. But again, the point is that it honors your presence, and each one of our voices is a part of that community dialogue. And so quickly, the talking piece I chose to use for us, and I don't know if folks can kind of get a feel for it, see it, it's a lot going on with him. Beautiful, solid piece of handcrafted wood. Beautiful artwork that was done by a friend. And so many years ago, one of my besties, we went through college together, we lived together, we had a great time. She was moving off to a new city, did not know anyone. It was a little scary for both of us. She was international, had no more family. Went to the new city with her, and we were connected with a gentleman there that we should meet. He was called the mayor of Harlem. And it was the most amazing connection. When I met this man, I knew he was going to take absolute care of my friend, that she had found a new community that was going to welcome her. But several months later, when I came back to visit, and it was around my birthday, he gave me this. I was floored because I know the work and the craft that it takes to go into it. But what was so important to me is that he held intention and space for community. That even as I was passing off this friend, in the little bit of time that we knew each other, he gleaned elements about what was important to me and what was important about the work I did. And he held that with intention to create this. So when I think about the intention of community and bringing people together in community in the space we hold for one another, this is the piece that I like to use. And we bring in the talking piece again, not just to honor the space and the voice, but as a way to kind of harness the energy around what we want to manifest. This is about community and intention. So I hope that you can use this piece to help manifest that as you go into your small groups. So again, and we'll drop it in the chat, an opportunity to briefly introduce yourself, to share the value that you hold in community, it's important, and how you want to be seen in the world. So Aish, if you can get us into small groups. And remember, you're welcome to pass if you just want to be present to witness. Awesome. Okay, I think we have, all right, lost a couple people, but folks are back. So I'm loving the values. I was looking them over as you all were in small group, and I would love to hear more, but maybe just some reflections from folks about how was that connection different? How was the opportunity to take space and reflect on those things different than our typical connections, and maybe what emerged from you in your small group? And feel free to come off mic or drop stuff in the chat.
I felt like we had a little bit more time and space to dive deeper into some of the things. And once people started sharing a little bit more of the specifics of, what brought them to this value, there were ways in which people were able to connect with one another that, weren't apparent the first time around.
Yeah, thank you. I love that reflection, Emily, and I love your value too, the inherent. I think that's one of the core fundamentals of kind of restorative practice, that we are all worthy and valuable as humans. But yes, this the time to make deeper connections, and the trust that was able to kind of be built and making those connections. And I'm seeing some great stuff in the chat, and if folks want to, feel free to come off if there are any other reflections about how that was a little different and how that felt. Just want to give some voice first. I really appreciate your comment, Amy, about safety. And I think that for me was one of the things that is really, again, a kind of fundamental about co-creating space in restorative practices. We often have our kind of perfunctory guidelines about, what's going to make this safe. But so much about safety is about knowing who I'm in community with, knowing what I want to be vulnerable to, what I needed yesterday to be present may be different from today. And so even starting the process with us naming who we are and how we show up starts to build that connection and that sense of trust, why we're here and how we want to be present. We get right to business, right? The time. Oh, I see a hand. Nick, come on in.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think in the first very brief one, we had some professional shields up. This is what I do. This is my title. This is what and I think the prompting in the second and thinking about values brings it to who am I rather than what is my job.
Absolutely. Thank you, Nick. That's one of my other favorite things too. We often stand behind like our titles. And, I use this a lot with our, with students in orientation at one group, early new students, and they had been together for a week. And a week of, hi, my name is Nina. I'm from New York. I study This is what I want to do at MIT. They did that for a week and had no meaningful connection, right? And so how quickly we can go deep if we shift the framework and allow space for people to show up with what is most authentic to them. How can we start to build trust and connection in a little short incremental way? So I want to lean into that just to kind of get us open to how do we start to build the container, the framework to even begin to start in on difficult dialogue, even to begin feel safe enough to share authentically about what our experiences are and what our needs are in community. So I'm going to go to the slides real quick. And I want to give you a couple of definitions for restorative justice and restorative practice. And I recognize that a lot of our framing towards restorative justice is around around harm and harm based, but I want to give you a few definitions so we can start to grapple with the different ways. That was you, David. I was trying to find you. There we go. These are the slides we didn't see. So the first one is by Howard Zehr. And he was one of the early practitioners, adopters, working with the Tlingit community and a lot of Native American communities to understand their practice and bring it forward to victim offender dialogues. So restorative justice is a process to involve, to the extent possible, those who have a stake in a specific offense and to collectively identify and address harms, needs, and obligations in order to heal and put things right as possible. I read the slide, God forbid, don't tell anyone I did that. That's like presentation faux pas, just reading the slides. But what I appreciate about this, again, is it's a pivot away from the idea that we're only looking at policy and law. And how do we understand harm and our impact on one another? Knowing that law is limited, policy does not reflect and recognize the identities and needs of everyone in community. If we shift that lens, we create a framework that allows us to see how everyone is impacted. So this is a video, and I want to show this clip quickly, maybe hands of folks. So you know Fania Davis? This is a crowd. I know you know Nina D. Go ahead, go Fania Davis. Yeah, so Fania Davis, sister of Angela Davis, a lot of civil rights and justice work, does a lot of restorative justice work, and I want you to hear in her words.
What I mean by justice is very close to what Dr. King means by justice. In 1955, right around the time that Rosa Parks was arrested, there was a mass meeting of the Montgomery Improvement Association in a church in Montgomery. And he offered this definition of justice. Justice is love, correcting that which stands against love. Or justice is love correcting that which revolts against love. Ours is a justice system that harms people who harm people to show that harming people is wrong. And so our system just replicates that harm. And from him, I learned there was this thing called restorative justice, that instead of perpetuating that endless cycle of harm, it seeks to interrupt it. It seeks to heal the harm, repair the damage that's done to relationships. It's a justice that seeks to create more social peace than social conflict. I learned as a civil rights trial lawyer that my clients, even when we won close to $1 million in damages for discrimination, they were more broken after going through the trial process. Their relationship with their employer was even worse. So I learned personally that ours is a system that creates more social conflict, that hurts relationships more than it helps them. Restorative justice seeks to flip that.
Awesome. I love that. Again, some wonderful work and words by Fania. She runs an organization called Our Joy out of Oakland. They do a lot of youth-centered restorative work. Again, I think we often focus on restorative justice because it grew out of a criminal response framework. But I also wanted to really, again, expand that to restorative practices, right? So how do we understand those underlying principles and values that motivate restorative justice? How do we not wait till we're in a moment of harm, but how do we center empathy, participation, dialogue, relationship building? How do we integrate that into how, not just our workplace and our schools, but I would even say for me, one of the most profound places restorative justice showed up was in my parenting and in my familial relationships, right? So it has the capacity, if we center these values, to help us think about how we can reform the ways that we work. So I want to share just another quick video, and this is from the Institute, International Institute of Restorative Practices out of Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. And this just gives a broad perspective of restorative practices and the many ways it's being applied today.
Our world is changing at a breathtaking pace. Social patterns that have long characterized human life are changing dramatically around the globe, diminishing social bonds within families, schools, workplaces, and communities. But humans are hardwired to connect. Just as we need food, shelter, and clothing, we also need strong and meaningful relationships to thrive. With all this in mind, what is restorative practices? Restorative practices is an emerging social science that studies how to strengthen relationships between individuals and within communities. When put into practice, the effects are profound. In schools, students experience greater safety and sense of belonging, resulting in improved behavior, less bullying, and less violence. In workplaces, leaders facilitate direct communication among staff and address conflict as it arises. The result is higher performance, greater accountability, and effective collaboration. In criminal justice, new options allow victims and offenders, friends and family, to repair the emotional harm caused by crime. Throughout our neighborhoods, restorative practices give regular people more voice in the issues that matter most. In a nutshell, restorative practices is the science of relationships and community. Your individual daily interactions have a big impact on the world around you, at your job, with young people, and throughout your community. How we relate matters. This video was brought to you by...
Okay, I'm going to stop there. I'm going to stop sharing so we can have a chance to reflect. Aish, if you can set us up for group. So we're going to just go back to group briefly. It's about 12:43. We'll give us just 4 minutes and just have a chance. Well, we'll do 3. So because I know that come back out time. And just, I want you a chance to, in your small groups, reflect about those definitions and what resonates most with you about restorative justice through those definitions and how that can be brought forward to campus. So thank you, Aish, to get us in small groups. All right, got folks back. So I want to try to get us through. And it's never enough time to be in community and connect, but I'm really anxious to hear about some of your reflections. If folks want to share what resonated with those definitions about restorative justice in practice. Let me see a hand if anyone wants to come off mic.
I'll talk. Yeah. We were saying it takes time, trust, and a relationship in order to move in that direction, which means that there has to be a culture shift in order to make time to do that. But we think it's really powerful, the introduction of the work. But we were talking about, well, then how do you shift that culture in institutions?
Yeah, that beast of time, right? Take time, make time. How do we begin that? Chris, I saw your hand. Come on in.
Thanks. Yeah, we were talking about, somebody mentioned a story about being in high school and hearing the names of kids who had to stay after school or had to go to detention or whatever. And we were talking about the power of shame, right? The way shame has been used, whether it's that way or in cancel culture, and how different, I was just thinking about how different it is with restorative practices to deal with those situations.
Yeah, shame is another element. I know folks are familiar with the compass of shame. It's a kind of psychological framework, but that, it's restorative space is intended to move away from those negative shame, right? That first instinct is, you did something, this is not how you want to be seen, but how do we stop that shame spiral? And how do we create conditions to transform that into something that is, productive and that will heal, not just the person who was harmed, but the person who created the harm as well. So a couple of other reflections. And I see Amy in the chat, and I would love any, responses to that. The difficulty of holding people accountable, systems and individual with love, right? I don't know if folks want to reflect to that, and especially as we're in the heels of MLK Jr. Day and reflecting on his legacy, and a lot of what he tried to bring forth was this idea of a kind of nonviolent movement. How do we center love? And I don't want to discount that as an aspirational challenge to us. How do we do that when there is so much harm that is unhealed? How do we create the space to move through that? So any more reflections about how those, Kate, come on.
So we talked about restorative practice specifically at MIT and how this video emphasized restorative practice as a science, and how at MIT we have restorative resolutions as an option for a complaint that is less rigid than the formal complaint process, and how that is, while distinct, not actually a negative. It doesn't make it any less functional, and because it is scientific in its methodology, insofar as it is a structured process, even though it isn't exactly the same every single time, that dynamic nature allows for innovation and response to the particular situation, and how that is such a good thing.
Yes, thank you. And I think that innovation and creativity that restorative practice allows us to sit with, right? And I how do we disrupt the systems? How do we create new possibilities for healing? And so much of our traditional systems are very limited in who they recognize as can be harmed and what harm looks like and what the remedies are for that. And part of what restorative justice asks us to do is not only look at the person and who was harmed or the people who committed harm, but what are the conditions in which that manifested? What needs to be reevaluated about how we practice, how we convene, what the conditions of our community are. And so I will say what you may see in here is there's a definite pull between what I'm speaking to, which is transformative justice. And some practitioners try to parse out restorative justice and transformative justice. So you might hear that debate in the work. I am a firm believer that we cannot have a true accountability and assessment of even those interpersonal dynamics without reflecting about the conditions that manifest that. If we take away the transformative part, what we create is another system of maintenance of the system of oppression that we know does not work for us. So part of it is how do we use these moments of harm to transform, to make us take that pause in the time that we need when harm occurs to really have a holistic and transformational response. But even before we think about harm, what intentions can we place around how we build community? And so I threw a lot of little things at you in a little bit of time that we had. I really wanted to try to get us into one more group reflection. Yay, nay, shaking heads. Okay, yay. All right, we'll just do it 3 minutes. So this is the important takeaway. Okay, I feel like, again, the transformational part. So again, this is very brief surface. I've thrown a lot of ideas at you. One thing I do hope you leave with an understanding is that RJ is not just a program model or a conflict resolution strategy. It's an ethical framework. It's about how we center equitable and just relationships and what we do to cultivate that. How do we cultivate our sense for empathy and care? How do we expand, not systems of retribution and punishment, but deepen a sense of accountability as a way to grow, heal, and be more connected and just? So leaving those things and giving you about 3 minutes in your small group, what's one thing that you could see potentially shifting in our community to help us be more restorative, whether it's a small thing or a big thing? Again, our work in IDHR was how can we bring that into our response systems? But we can think about how we infuse that across our relationships, our workspaces. So quick 3 minutes before we close out. What's one thing that we can move with and take away of how we can make our community more restorative? I know, big task. It's okay. We got to start thinking somewhere. So thank you, Aish. All right, we got folks trickling back in. As I promised, I threw a lot of stuff at you in a little bit of time, so I'm excited for you and indulging me and leaning into connection. Got a quick few minutes. If folks want to share a little bit about what came up, please feel free to fill the chat as well if you have stuff you want to share. But I'd love to hear 1 or 2 reflections from your small groups. What can we bring forward to make our community more restorative?
Someone in my group talked about a barrier to this is people being unwilling to accept responsibility, like fear of being sued, just like an unwillingness to, that gets in the way of people just trying to protect themselves from blame.
Yeah. Thank you. And it's Tammy, right? Yep. And that is a whole, people said part 2, we talk about creating the conditions for accountability, right? Very much a part of our culture. Punishment is about defense and not taking responsibility and denial and trying to avert accountability. So how do we change those conditions? So thank you. A couple other thoughts, quick, maybe about what are the challenges or opportunities we can start to take up.
I'm happy to chime in. In my group, we talked about the ways in which MIT is sort of starting to dip its toe in this water, these workshops being one example, or like Craig Wilder in the history department, his research on the history and legacy of slavery at MIT, and publicizing that research as a form of, I guess, like restorative justice, and also helping transform the Institute. But I also think there are ways in which we, in our own individual work, through equitable admissions process and looking at not only who is in the classroom, but how we're funding them. So shifting toward need-based fellowship and scholarship funding versus merit-based. So I think there are ways in which, you know, we all touch the Institute in some way. And so thinking collectively, if we all can make tiny shifts in our work, what that collective and some of those parts, if you will, might look like.
Ooh, some good stuff in the chat. And thank you, Meredith. Again, I think there's so much, this is so surface of us just kind of touching on, you know, what this means and how can we start to be innovative about what restorative justice and restorative practices look at MIT. And we have to be in conversation as a community to figure that out. So thank you all. I know we're at time and our time is so precious, as we said. I know if you didn't get your Uber Eats link, make sure you get that. I will be sharing the slide decks and some other resources with you all to make sure you have opportunities to follow up your own knowledge. But I also wanted to give a quick minute to David Lowry, who's here with us to talk about some of the work on campus happening with the Native American community. So David.
Yeah, thank you. Very quickly, perhaps this is the beginning of part 2 or the deeper kind of restorative justice conversation, but following Craig Wilder's Slavery in MIT project, Craig actually began what I'm calling Project Indigenous MIT. I was hired as a faculty member this summer to lead that. But essentially everything in the restorative justice space begins with America's original sin, which is genocide. So when you're talking about MIT has no Native faculty until now, I guess, but no tenure line Native faculty. And, you know, Native students over the course of the last 50 or 60 years at MIT have felt very marginalized. Tied into that is MIT's role in kind of, shall we say, injustices across the continent and across the world, which are tied into, you know, MIT's enfranchisement of Native people across time and space. So that's the conversation that we're leading now. I'm actually about to talk to the provost today, along with a group of Native Indigenous students, about what we can do to move forward with prioritizing Native students at MIT. So again, perhaps that's part 2 of your conversation, but yeah, restorative justice in the United States begins with Native people and restoring and recompensing, and there's a hashtag that's famous now, land back. And there's no coincidence in that being a hashtag. Native people really want America to begin justice conversations with us.
Yeah.
Anyway, thank you so much for giving me a moment.
Thank you, David. So many conversations to have, so much learning to do. I hope to see you all in community. Please connect if you just want to know more about what we're doing at IDHR or just restorative justice and practices in general. I have the privilege of working with schools across the country around this. So there's lots of good things happening. We're still at the precipice of innovation and the willingness to do some real major transformation. And I hold a large hope for how restorative practice can guide us through that. So I want to pass on some of that hope to you all through this conversation and our continued work together. So thank you. Thank you, Beatrice and ICO.
Thank you so much, Nina. Also, whoever's left in this space, please, if you have any ideas or topics for further engagement as it relates to restorative justice or beyond that, please feel free to email me. And I'm going to put my email in the chat. Again, we're always looking for ideas and opportunities to engage with each other. And what best way is to hear from the community. So thank you everyone for joining us this afternoon. David, Shane, thank you so much. And best of luck with your conversation with the provost. Really looking forward to more support for our Indigenous community. John Dozier, thank you. Good to see you. And thank you, everyone.